The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as William finished his second cup of coffee. His hands shook slightly as he read through the briefing notes one more time. Today was different from their usual royal visits. Today they were going to St. Mary's Children's Hospital to meet children who were fighting for their lives. Kate walked into the breakfast room wearing a simple blue dress. She had chosen it carefully. Blue was supposed to be calming and peaceful. She wanted the children to feel comfortable around her. Her stylist had suggested something more formal, but Kate refused. These children deserved to see her as a person, not just a princess. William looked up from his papers and saw the worry in his wife's eyes. They had been married for years, and he could read her emotions like a book. She was nervous about today, just like he was. They both knew this visit would be harder than anything they had done before. The drive to the hospital took 40 minutes through busy London streets. Kate stared out the window, watching normal people going about their normal days. She wondered what it would be like to have such simple worries. Should I buy milk today, or will it rain this afternoon? Instead, she was thinking about how to comfort children who might not see another. Christmas. William reached over and took her hand. His palm was sweaty and his fingers trembled. Neither of them spoke, but they both understood. This was going to test them in ways they had never been tested before. They were used to opening buildings and shaking hands with adults who knew how to behave around royalty. Children were different. Children were honest and raw and real. The hospital appeared ahead of them like a giant brick fortress. St. Mary's had been caring for sick children for over 100 years. The building looked old and tired, but Kate knew that inside were some of the best doctors in the world. These doctors performed miracles every day. They saved children who everyone else had given up on. Their car pulled through the main gates, and Kate saw the crowd of reporters waiting outside. Cameras flashed and people shouted questions, but she barely heard them. Her mind was focused on what waited inside those hospital walls. She thought about her own children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, safe at home with their nanny, and felt guilty for having such healthy, happy kids when other parents were watching their babies suffer. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the hospital director, was waiting for them at the main entrance. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had been working with sick children for 30 years and had seen everything. Nothing surprised her anymore, but even she looked nervous today. The doctor shook their hands and led them through the main lobby. The walls were covered with colorful artwork made by patients over the years. Handprints in every color of the rainbow spelled out messages of hope and love. Kate stopped to read some of them. "Thank you for making me better. I love my nurse, Jenny. Daddy says I am brave like a lion." They walked down a long corridor lined with wheelchairs and medical equipment. The smell of antiseptic was strong, but underneath it, Kate could detect something else. The smell of fear and sadness and desperate hope all mixed together. It made her stomach turn, and she had to take deep breaths to keep from feeling sick. Dr. Mitchell explained that they would be visiting 3 different wards today. The first was for children with cancer. The second was for kids with rare genetic diseases. The third was the intensive care unit where the sickest children stayed. She warned them that some of the children might not look like normal healthy kids. Some had lost their hair from treatment. Others had tubes and wires attached to their bodies. A few might not be able to talk or move normally. William nodded, but Kate could see his jaw tightening. He was trying to stay strong, but this was affecting him more than he wanted to admit. They had their own children at home, and every parent's worst nightmare was having a sick child. Today, they were going to meet dozens of parents living that nightmare every single day. They stopped outside the first ward, and Dr. Mitchell gave them one final briefing. She told them that many of these children had been excited about their visit for weeks. Some had made special cards and drawings. Others had been practicing what they wanted to say. A few were too sick to leave their beds, but were hoping for just a quick hello and maybe a photo. Kate touched the small cross, necklace she always wore when she needed extra strength. She thought about all the prayers that had been said in this hospital. Parents praying for their children to get better. Children praying to see another birthday. Doctors praying for wisdom to know how to help. She said her own silent prayer, asking for the right words and the strength not to cry in front of these brave kids. William straightened his tie one last time and took a deep breath. His royal training had taught him how to handle difficult situations, but nothing had prepared him for this. He thought about his mother, Princess Diana, and how she had always been so natural with sick children. She never seemed nervous or uncomfortable. She just loved them, and they could feel it. He hoped he could be half as good as she had been. The door to the children's ward stood in front of them, like a gateway to another world. Behind that door were children who had seen more pain and fear than most adults ever would. But Dr. Mitchell had also told them something else. These children had more joy and hope and pure love than anyone else she had ever met. They celebrated small victories like being able to eat a whole meal or walking to the bathroom by themselves. They found happiness in simple things like a favorite nurse working their shift or a therapy dog coming to visit. Kate and William looked at each other one more time. They were about to enter a place where miracles and heartbreak happened side by side every single day. They were about to meet children who would change the way they saw the world forever. Neither of them knew it yet, but behind that door was a journey that would transform them from royal visitors into true advocates for the most vulnerable people in society. Dr. Mitchell reached for the door handle and paused. She looked at the royal couple and saw two people who were genuinely scared but determined to do the right thing. That was exactly the kind of visitors these children deserved. People who cared enough to be nervous. People who understood that this mattered more than any photo opportunity or publicity event. The door opened, and they stepped inside to begin the most important royal duty of their lives. The first thing that hit them was the sound, not the beeping of machines or the whisper of worried voices they had expected. Instead, they heard laughter. Pure, genuine children's laughter echoing through the brightly painted hallway. Kate felt some of the tension leave her shoulders as she realized these were still children. Despite everything they were going through, the ward was decorated like a magical kingdom. Purple and pink butterflies hung from the ceiling. Hand-painted murals covered the walls, showing castles and dragons and fairy tale characters. Someone had worked very hard to make this place feel less like a hospital and more like a playground. Kate smiled when she saw a mural of Cinderella's castle painted right next to the nurse's station. Dr. Mitchell led them toward a large room filled with the sound of children playing. Through the glass doors, they could see kids sitting around small tables working on art projects. Some were in wheelchairs. Others had bandages wrapped around their heads. A few had feeding tubes taped to their faces. But every single one of them was focused on creating something beautiful. A little girl with no hair and the biggest brown eyes Kate had ever seen looked up from her painting and saw them through the glass. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. She dropped her paintbrush and started waving frantically at the window. Within seconds, every child in the room was looking their way, and the excitement was electric. William felt his heart skip a beat when he saw how genuinely happy these children were to see them. He had expected sadness and fear, but instead found joy and anticipation. These kids had been looking forward to this visit, and their enthusiasm was infectious. He found himself smiling for the first time all morning. Dr. Mitchell opened the door, and immediately they were surrounded by a group of children who moved as fast as their conditions would allow. Some shuffled slowly, dragging 4 poles behind them. Others raced over in wheelchairs. A few needed help from nurses to get close enough to see the royal visitors properly. The little girl with brown eyes was the first to reach them. She was wearing a bright yellow hospital gown that was 3 sizes too big for her tiny frame. Her name tag read Emma, and she was clutching a handmade card against her chest like it was made of precious jewels. Emma looked up at Kate with such pure adoration that it took the princess's breath away. This child was probably no older than 7, but her eyes held wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. She had clearly been through things that no child should ever have to experience, yet her face showed nothing but happiness and excitement. Without saying a word, Emma held out her card with both hands. Kate knelt down to the little girl's level and accepted the gift as if it were the most important document she had ever received. The card was made from construction paper and covered with glitter and stickers. On the front, Emma had drawn 2 stick figures wearing crowns holding hands with a group of children inside the card. Emma had written in careful block letters, "Thank you for caring about us." The words were simple, but they hit Kate like a physical blow. This child, who was fighting for her life, had taken the time to thank them for caring. Kate felt tears starting to form in her eyes and had to blink rapidly to keep them from falling. William watched his wife's reaction and felt his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He knelt down next to Kate so he could be at Emma's eye level too. The little girl looked back and forth between them with wonder, as if she couldn't believe they were really there. Emma leaned forward and whispered something in Kate's ear. Her voice was so quiet that no one else could hear what she said, but whatever it was made Kate's face crumple with emotion. The princess whispered something back that made Emma giggle with pure delight. The sound of that laugh was like music, and everyone in the room smiled. Just hearing it, more children gathered around them now, each wanting their moment with the royal visitors. There was Marcus, a boy about 10 years old, who was confined to a wheelchair but had the most mischievous grin William had ever seen. There was Sophie, who was hooked up to a portable oxygen tank but kept trying to fix Kate's hair because she thought princesses should always look perfect. There was James, who had lost his left arm to cancer but was determined to show William how well he could draw with his right hand. There was Lily, who was so weak she had to be carried by her nurse but insisted on giving both William and Kate a flower she had made from tissue paper during craft time. Each child had a story, and each story was more heartbreaking and inspiring than the last. But what struck William and Kate most was how normal these children acted. They giggled and showed off and tried to impress their royal visitors just like any other kids would. Their illnesses were just part of their lives, not the defining feature of who they were. Kate found herself relaxing for the first time since they had arrived. These children didn't want pity or sadness. They wanted to share their joy and show off their accomplishments. They wanted to be treated like the amazing kids they were, not like victims of terrible diseases. A nurse approached them carrying a baby, who couldn't have been more than 2 years old. The little boy had tubes coming out of his nose and arms, but his eyes were bright and alert. When he saw Kate, he reached out his tiny hands toward her and made happy gurgling sounds. Without hesitation, Kate took the baby in her arms. He immediately snuggled against her shoulder, and she could feel his tiny heart beating against her chest. This child was so small and fragile, yet he radiated warmth and love. Kate found herself swaying gently back and forth the way she did with her own children at home. William watched his wife holding that sick baby and felt something shift inside his chest. These weren't just statistics or charity cases they were reading about in briefing papers. These were real children with personalities and dreams and an incredible capacity for love. They deserved so much more than a quick photo opportunity and a polite visit. The children began showing them around their ward like tour guides in their own little world. They pointed out their favorite spots and introduced them to their favorite nurses. They showed off their artwork hanging on the walls and explained which therapy dogs were the friendliest. They were proud of their space and wanted their important visitors to see everything. Emma stayed close to Kate's side throughout, the tours chattering away about her treatments and her dreams and her favorite movies. She talked about wanting to be a doctor when she grew up so she could help other sick kids feel better. She talked about her little brother at home who sent her drawings every day. She talked about everything except being scared or sad. As they prepared to move to the next ward, Emma tugged on Kate's dress one more time. When the princess leaned down, Emma whispered that she had something very important to tell her about a special friend who lived in a different part of the hospital, someone who really needed to meet them but couldn't come to the playroom because she was too sick to leave her bed. Emma's eyes were serious now, and she made Kate promise to remember what she was saying. There was someone very important waiting for them somewhere in this hospital, someone who had been hoping and praying for this visit more than anyone else. Emma said they would understand when they met her, but that it was very, very important that they didn't leave without saying hello, Kate promised. Emma she would remember, and asked where they could find this special friend. But Emma just smiled, mysteriously, and said they would know when the time was right. Sometimes the most important meetings happen when you least expect them. Sometimes you have to trust your heart to show you where you need to be. Dr. Mitchell led them down another corridor, toward the second ward. The walls here were different from the first section. Instead of fairy tale murals, these walls were covered with photographs. Hundreds of smiling children's faces looked down at them from picture frames of every size and color. Some photos were recent, and others looked like they had been hanging there for years. Kate paused to look at the pictures more closely. Each photograph had a small nameplate underneath, with dates. She realized with a heavy heart that many of the dates showed children who had lived very short lives. These were memorial photos of kids who had fought brave battles but hadn't won. Yet every single face in every single picture was smiling. William noticed his wife studying the photos and came to stand beside her. One picture caught his attention. Immediately, he was bald from treatment, but his grin was so wide it seemed to light up the entire photograph. The nameplate read Tommy Johnson, 2018 to 2022. He loved dinosaurs and chocolate ice cream. The simple words hit William like a punch to the stomach. This little boy had lived only for years, but someone had made sure to remember what made him happy. William wondered about Tommy's parents and how they found the strength to go on after losing their child. He wondered if they ever came back to visit this wall of memories. Dr. Mitchell saw them looking at the photographs and explained that this was their memorial wall. Every child who had been a patient at the hospital was remembered here, whether they had gotten better and gone home or whether they had died. The families could visit any time they wanted to see their child's picture and remember the good times they had shared. She pointed to a recent addition to the wall. A beautiful girl with long dark hair and bright green eyes smiled back at them. From a silver frame, she wanted to be a teacher and help other children learn. Jessica had died just 2 months ago, but her parents had insisted on adding her picture to the wall because she had been so happy during her time at the hospital. Kate felt tears, threatening again, but took a deep breath and followed Dr. Mitchell toward the entrance to the second ward. This section of the hospital housed children with rare genetic diseases. Many of these kids had conditions so unusual that only a few dozen people in the whole world had the same illness. Some couldn't walk or talk normally. Others looked perfectly healthy, but had invisible problems with their organs or immune systems. As they approached the ward entrance, Kate heard a different kind of sound than what they had experienced in the first section. This wasn't the happy chatter of children playing games. Instead, she heard the quiet hum of serious conversation, mixed with the gentle beeping of medical equipment. The children here were often sicker and needed more intensive care. Dr. Mitchell warned them that some of the children in this ward might not be able to communicate normally. Some had developmental delays caused by their genetic conditions. Others were too weak to talk much, but she assured them that every child would benefit from their visit, even if they couldn't express their excitement in typical ways. The first child they met was Sarah, an 8-year-old girl who had been born with a condition that affected her muscles. She couldn't walk and had trouble holding her head up, but her eyes were alert and intelligent. When she saw William and Kate approaching her wheelchair, she made soft, happy sounds and tried to clap her hands together. Sarah's mother explained that her daughter understood everything that was said to her, even though she couldn't respond with words. Sarah loved music and stories and had been listening to audiobooks about princesses for weeks in preparation for this visit. When Kate knelt down and started talking to Sarah about her favorite fairy tales, the little girl's face lit up with pure joy. Next, they met David, a 10-year-old boy whose genetic condition had affected his growth and development. He was much smaller than other children his age and spoke in simple sentences, but his personality was enormous. David had been waiting by the window all morning, watching for their car to arrive. He grabbed William's hand and wouldn't let go. He led them around the ward, showing off everything he was proud of. David's bed area was decorated with dozens of drawings that he had created himself. Despite his developmental challenges, David had an incredible artistic talent. His drawings were detailed and precise, showing an understanding of perspective and shading that amazed both William and Kate. The drawings covered every surface around his bed. There were pictures of castles with elaborate towers and flags flying in the wind. There were knights in shining armor riding horses across green fields. There were dragons breathing fire, and princesses in flowing gowns dancing at royal balls. Each picture was signed with David's name, written in careful block letters. But what stopped William and Kate in their tracks was a particular drawing that hung directly above David's pillow. It showed 2 figures wearing crowns standing in what was clearly a hospital room. The figures were surrounded by children in wheelchairs and hospital beds. At the bottom of the picture, David had written, "The king and queen visit sick kids to make them happy." William stared at the drawing in amazement. This child had imagined their visit and drawn it weeks before they had actually arrived. But the drawing wasn't just accurate, it was prophetic. David had somehow captured the emotion and importance of what was happening better than any professional artist could have done. David's mother explained that her son had been working on these drawings. For months, every day he would ask when the prince and princess were coming to visit. Every night he would add more details to his pictures. The drawing of their visit had been his masterpiece, and he had spent hours making sure every detail was perfect. Kate asked David to tell her about his drawings, and his face glowed with pride as he explained each one. He talked about the castle, where he imagined princes and princesses lived. He described the brave knights who protected people who couldn't protect themselves. He explained that dragons weren't really scary if you knew how to talk to them nicely. As David talked, William realized that this child saw the world in a way that was both innocent and profound. Despite his own challenges, David's drawings showed a deep understanding of courage and kindness and hope. He had created an entire fantasy world where good always triumphed over evil, and where people in power used their strength to help those who needed it most. Other children in the ward gathered around to listen to David explain his artwork. Some came in wheelchairs pushed by nurses. Others walked slowly with the help of walkers or braces. A few were carried by their parents because they were too weak to move on their own. But every child was fascinated by David's drawings and proud to be sharing them with such important visitors. One drawing in particular caught Kate's attention. It showed a hospital room with a single bed surrounded by hundreds of pieces of paper. A small figure lay in the bed holding what looked like a pen or pencil. The room's walls were covered with writing that Kate couldn't quite make out from where she stood. When she asked David about this picture, his expression became serious. He explained that somewhere in the hospital was a girl who couldn't get out of bed because she was too sick. David said he had never met this girl, but the nurses had told him about her, and he thought she must be very special to write so much. Kate felt a chill run down her spine as she remembered Emma's mysterious words about someone special who needed to meet them. A girl who was too sick to leave her room, but who had something important to share with the world. William noticed his wife's reaction and asked David if he knew where this girl's room was located. David pointed down the hallway toward a section. He said the nurses called it the quiet area where the sickest children stayed. David had never been there himself because he wasn't sick enough, but he knew it was where the girl who wrote all the letters lived as they prepared to leave. David's bedside, he gave Kate one of his drawings as a gift. It was a picture of a princess wearing a blue dress just like the one Kate had chosen for today. The princess in the drawing was kneeling next to a child's bed holding the child's hand. At the bottom, David had written, "Princesses make sad children happy by caring about them." Kate accepted the drawing with tears in her eyes and promised David that she would treasure it forever. She realized that this child had understood something about royal duty that many adults never grasped. True leadership wasn't about wearing crowns or living in palaces. It was about using whatever power you had to bring comfort and hope to people who needed it most. As they walked away from David's area, Kate couldn't stop thinking about his drawing of the girl who wrote letters. Two different children had now mentioned someone special who was waiting for them somewhere in this hospital, someone who needed to meet them but couldn't come to where they were. Kate felt a growing certainty that finding this mysterious girl was going to be the most important part of their entire visit. Dr. Mitchell led them toward the third and final ward, but Kate could sense the atmosphere changing as they walked deeper into the hospital. The colorful decorations became less frequent, and the hallways grew quieter. This was the intensive care section where the sickest children stayed. The children here needed constant medical attention, and many couldn't leave their beds at all. The walls in this section were painted in soft pastel colors instead of bright primary shades. The lighting was dimmer and more gentle. Everything was designed to create a peaceful, calming environment for children who were fighting the hardest battles of their lives. Kate noticed that even the sounds were different here. The beeping of monitors was more constant, and the voices of staff members were hushed and respectful. As they approached the entrance to the intensive care ward, Dr. Mitchell stopped and turned to face them. Her expression was more serious than it had been in the other sections. She explained that the children they were about to meet were very sick. Some might not survive their illnesses. Others had already been given only weeks or months to live by their doctors. She warned them that this would be emotionally difficult, but also incredibly important. These children rarely received visitors outside of their immediate families. Many had been in the hospital for months or even years. A visit from people they admired could bring them more joy than William and Kate could possibly imagine. The first room they entered held a little boy named Alex, who was only 6 years old. He had been born with a rare heart condition that required multiple surgeries. Alex was connected to several machines that helped his heart pump blood through his tiny body. Despite all the tubes and wires, he managed to smile when he saw his royal visitors. Alex's parents had been taking turns staying with him around the clock for the past 3 months. His mother looked exhausted, but her face lit up when she saw William and Kate approaching her son's bed. She explained that Alex had been asking about their visit every day since he heard they were coming. He had been too weak to join the other children, but had been hoping desperately that they might have time to stop by his room. Kate sat down carefully on the edge of Alex's bed and took his small hand in hers. His fingers were so thin and pale, but his grip was surprisingly strong. Alex whispered that he had been practicing what he wanted to say to them, but now that they were here, he couldn't remember any of it. William laughed gently and told Alex that sometimes the best conversations happen when you just say whatever comes to your heart. Alex's eyes grew wide with excitement as he began talking about his favorite superhero movies. He explained that he wanted to be a superhero when he grew up so he could help other kids who were sick like him. He said his superpower would be making people feel better just by hugging them. Kate felt tears starting to form as she listened to this brave little boy talk about using his own pain to help others. The next room held twin sisters named Mia and Zoe, who were 8 years old. They had been born with a genetic condition that affected their immune systems. Both girls had been in the hospital for over a year because their bodies couldn't fight off infections like healthy children could. They lived in a special room with filtered air and had to be very careful about germs. Despite their isolation, the twins had created their own little world inside their hospital room. They had turned their beds into a fort using blankets and pillows. They had made paper dolls and put on puppet shows for the nurses. They had even started their own newsletter that they shared with other patients to keep everyone updated on hospital gossip and funny stories. Mia was the more outgoing of the two sisters and immediately started interviewing William and Kate for their next newsletter issue. She asked them serious questions about what it was like to be royal and whether they ever got nervous about their jobs. Zoe was quieter, but had prepared a list of jokes that she wanted to share. Her favorite was about a princess who lost her. Schubert found something even better, which was a friend who didn't care if she had shoes or not. As they moved from room to room, Kate began to notice something remarkable about these children. Despite being the sickest kids in the hospital, they seemed to have developed an incredible wisdom about what really mattered in life. They talked about friendship and kindness and love with a depth that many adults never achieved. Their experiences with illness and pain had taught them to appreciate every moment of joy and connection. In one room, they met Marcus, who was 12 years old and had been battling leukemia for 2 years. Marcus had lost his hair and weight from treatment, but his personality filled the entire room. He had been learning magic tricks during his long hospital stay and insisted on performing a show for his royal visitors. His tricks weren't perfect, but his enthusiasm was infectious, and soon everyone in the room was laughing and clapping. Marcus explained that he had started learning magic because he wanted to bring smiles to other patients who were feeling sad or scared. He said that making people happy was the best medicine he had ever found. Even when he felt terrible from his treatments, he could still make someone else laugh with a silly magic trick, and that made him feel better too. The next room held a teenage girl named Rebecca, who was 15 and had been in the hospital for 6 months. She had a rare condition that affected her lungs and needed help breathing from a machine. Rebecca had been a star student before she got sick and was determined not to fall behind in her education. Her hospital bed was surrounded by textbooks and homework assignments. Rebecca told them that her dream was to become a doctor so she could help find cures for diseases like hers. She said that being sick had taught her how important it was to have doctors who truly understood what their patients were going through. She wanted to be the kind of doctor who remembered what it felt like to be scared and in pain and who never gave up hope. As they talked with Rebecca, Kate noticed that she kept glancing toward the door as if she was expecting someone or looking for something. When Kate asked about it, Rebecca's expression became thoughtful. She said there was someone else in the hospital who really needed to meet them. Someone who had been waiting much longer than any of the other children. Rebecca explained that down the hall was a girl who had been in the hospital for almost a year. This girl couldn't have visitors in her room because her condition was too fragile. She couldn't join group activities or leave her bed. But Rebecca said this girl was the most amazing person she had ever met because she spent all her time writing letters to people all over the world. The girl wrote letters to other sick children to encourage them. She wrote letters to doctors and nurses to thank them for their hard work. She wrote letters to her family, telling them how much she loved them. She even wrote letters to people she had never met, but who she thought might need to know that someone cared about them. Rebecca said that all the staff members in the hospital knew about this girl's letters. Some of the letters were so beautiful and wise that nurses would read them when they were having difficult days. The girl's words had helped many people through hard times, even though she was just a child herself. Kate felt her heart racing as Rebecca described this mysterious letter writer. This was clearly the same person that Emma and David had mentioned. 3 different children had now told them about someone special who needed to meet them. Someone who was using her words to heal others even while she was fighting her own battle with illness. William asked Rebecca if she knew where they could find this girl. Rebecca pointed toward a hallway that led to the most restricted part of the intensive care unit. She said the girl's name was Lily and that she lived in a room at the very end of the corridor. Rebecca warned them that Lily was very sick and might not be able to talk for very long, but that meeting them would mean more to her than anything else in the world as they prepared to leave. Rebecca's room, Kate felt a growing sense of urgency. They had met dozens of incredible children today, but somehow she knew that their most important encounter was still ahead of them. Everything had been leading to this moment. All the hints and clues had been pointing them toward one special girl who had something crucial to share with them. Dr. Mitchell appeared at Rebecca's doorway looking slightly uncomfortable. She explained that they were running behind schedule and that their official visit was supposed to end soon. The section where Lily's room was located was highly restricted and wasn't part of their planned tour. She suggested that they might need to save that visit for another time. But Kate and William exchanged a meaningful look. They both knew that they couldn't leave without meeting Lily. Too many children had mentioned her for this to be a coincidence. They had come to the hospital thinking they were there to bring comfort to sick children, but they were beginning to realize that these children had much more to teach them than they had ever imagined. William politely but firmly told Dr. Mitchell that they needed to meet Lily before they left. He said that sometimes the most important parts of any visit were the ones that weren't planned. Kate nodded in agreement and added that they had been directed to Lily by the children themselves, and that seemed like a sign they shouldn't ignore. Dr. Mitchell looked uncertain but finally agreed to take them to Lily's room. She warned them again that this girl was extremely sick and that the visit would need to be very brief. But as they walked down the restricted hallway toward Lily's room, Kate felt a certainty growing in her heart that this meeting was going to change everything. The restricted hallway was different from anywhere else they had been in the hospital. The walls were plain white, with no decorations or artwork. The only sounds were the quiet hum of air filtration systems and the distant beeping of monitors. Kate felt like they were walking into the most sacred part of the hospital, where life and death decisions were made every single day. Dr. Mitchell stopped outside a door at the very end of the corridor. A small sign read, "Room 247," and underneath it was a nameplate that simply said, "Lily Thompson, age 12. The doctor turned to William and Kate with a serious expression and explained that Lily had been in this room for 11 months. Her condition was so fragile that she couldn't have many visitors and couldn't leave her bed at all. She warned them that Lily might look very different from the other children they had met. The girl was extremely thin and weak from her illness and treatments. She had tubes and wires connected to her body that helped keep her alive. But Dr. Mitchell's expression softened as she added that, despite everything Lily was going through, she had the most beautiful spirit of anyone in the entire hospital. Through the small window in the door, Kate could see into Lily's room. She took her breath away. The room looked like a paper wonderland. Every surface was covered with sheets of paper. The walls were lined with what looked like hundreds of letters and stories. The bedside tables were stacked high with notebooks and journals. Even the windowsill was covered with neat piles of handwritten pages. In the middle of all this paper sat the tiniest girl Kate had ever seen. Lily was propped up in her hospital bed, surrounded by pillows and blankets. She was so small and fragile that she looked like she might disappear if someone breathed too hard. Her dark hair had grown back in short, soft curls after her treatments, and her skin was pale as porcelain. But her eyes were the most striking thing about her. They were deep brown and seemed to hold wisdom far beyond her 12 years. Who was clearly Lily's mother sat in a chair beside the bed. Reading aloud from one of the many papers scattered around the room, her voice was gentle and soothing as she read what sounded like a letter. Kate realized that the mother was reading one of Lily's own letters back to her as if they were the most precious words ever written. Dr. Mitchell knocked softly on the door. Before opening it slowly, Lily's mother looked up and smiled when she saw the visitors approaching. She had been expecting them and had spent the morning helping Lily prepare for this moment that the girl had been dreaming about for weeks. Lily saw William and Kate entering her room, her entire face transformed. Despite her weakness and pain, her smile was radiant and filled the entire space with warmth. She tried to sit up straighter in her bed, but the effort was clearly difficult for her. Her mother quickly moved to help arrange the pillows behind her. Back so she could see her visitors better, Kate approached the bed slowly, not wanting to overwhelm this fragile child. She was amazed by the sheer volume of papers surrounding Lily's bed. There were letters addressed to people all over the world. There were stories written in careful handwriting. There were poems and essays and what looked like diary entries. This 12-year-old girl had created an entire library from her hospital bed. Lily's voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke, but her words were clear and thoughtful. She told William and Kate that she had been waiting to meet them for so long that she had almost given up hope. She explained that she had something very important to share with them, but she wasn't sure how to begin because there was so much she wanted to say. Her mother picked up a special folder from the bedside table and handed it to Lily with trembling hands. Inside the folder were letters that Lily had written specifically for this visit. Letters addressed to William and Kate that she had been working on for months. Each letter was written on beautiful stationery that her mother had brought from home to make them extra special with great effort. Lily pulled out the first letter and held it toward Kate. Her hands shook from weakness, but her determination was strong. The letter was written in purple ink and decorated with small drawings of flowers and hearts around the borders. Kate accepted the letter as if it were made of gold and carefully unfolded it to read. The letter began with, "Dear Princess Kate," and continued with words that were so mature and thoughtful that Kate could hardly believe they came from a 12-year-old child. Lily had written about her dreams for the future, even though she knew she might not live to see them come true. She wrote about wanting to help other children who were scared and alone in hospitals. She wrote about the importance of kindness and hope even when everything seemed hopeless. But what struck Kate most deeply was how Lily wrote about gratitude. This child, who had every reason to be angry or sad, instead wrote about how thankful she was for every day she had been given. She wrote about the wonderful nurses who took care of her and the doctors who worked so hard to help her feel better. She wrote about her parents who never left her side and who read to her every single day. William read over Kate's shoulder and felt his own eyes filling with tears. This was not a letter from a dying child asking for pity or complaining about unfairness. This was a letter from a wise young woman who had learned the most important lessons about life while fighting the hardest battle imaginable. Lily had more letters in her folder, and she wanted to share each one. There was a letter about the importance of using whatever platform you have to help people who need it most. There was a letter about how even small acts of kindness can change someone's entire day. There was a letter about the power of words to heal hearts that medicine couldn't reach. As Lily read her letters aloud, her voice grew stronger despite her physical weakness. These words were her life's work, and sharing them gave her energy that her sick body couldn't provide. Her mother watched with pride and amazement as her daughter transformed from a fragile patient into a powerful teacher and philosopher. Kate asked Lily how she had found the strength to write so many beautiful letters while dealing with such a serious illness. Lily's answer was simple but profound. She said that writing letters to other people made her feel useful even when her body wasn't working properly. When she couldn't get out of bed or play like other children, she could still use words to make people feel loved and important. She explained that every letter she wrote was like sending a piece of her heart out into the world. She wrote to other sick children to let them know they weren't alone. She wrote to their parents to help them stay strong during the hardest times of their lives. She wrote to doctors and nurses to thank them for their dedication and to remind them how much their work mattered. Lily pulled out another letter that she said was the most important one of all. This letter was addressed to people in positions of power and influence. People like William and Kate who had the ability to make real changes in the world. The letter was longer than the others and filled with ideas about how to help children who were facing serious illnesses. She had written about the need for more research funding to find cures for rare diseases. She had written about the importance of making hospitals feel less scary and more welcoming for children. She had written about programs that could help families who couldn't afford medical treatments for their sick kids, but most importantly, Lily had written about the need for people to remember that children with serious illnesses were still just children. They still wanted to laugh and play and dream about the future. They still needed to feel important and valued even when their bodies were failing them. They still had wisdom and love to share with the world, if only someone would take the time to listen. As Lily finished reading her most important letter, Kate realized that this 12-year-old girl understood things about leadership and service that many adults never learned. Lily had figured out how to use her own suffering to create something beautiful and meaningful for others. She had turned her hospital room into a center for hope and inspiration that reached far beyond these four walls. William asked Lily what she hoped would happen after their visit. What did she want them to do with all the wisdom she had shared? Lily's answer was immediate and clear. She wanted them to promise that they would never forget about children like her. Children whose voices might be quiet, but whose hearts were full of love and hope that deserved to be heard. She wanted them to promise that they would use their influence to make sure that no child facing a serious illness would ever feel forgotten or unimportant. She wanted them to promise that they would find ways to share the letters and stories of brave children who had important things to say to the world. Kate took Lily's small hand in both of hers and made that promise with tears streaming down her face. William knelt beside the bed and added his own promise that they would dedicate themselves to making sure Lily's voice and the voices of children like her would be heard by people who had the power to make real changes. Every time William and Kate visited a hospital, they carried some of Lily's letters with them. They would share her words with other patients and families who were facing similar struggles. They would remind these brave children that their voices mattered and that their experiences could help others even in the midst of their own pain. The door to room 247 had changed everything, not just for William and Kate, but for thousands of children and families around the world. Behind that door, they had discovered that true leadership meant listening to the people who needed help most, and then using whatever power you had to amplify their voices and act on their wisdom. Lily's legacy proved that age and health and circumstances don't determine the value of a person's contributions to the world. Sometimes the most powerful teachers come in the smallest packages, and the most important lessons are learned in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, opening a door you weren't supposed to open leads to the most meaningful work of your entire life.